like breaking, we are taking, this is our time. Just breathe, this will be a hard fight. The truth cash out in the night.
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope everybody's doing well. We're finally get some better weather here in Florida. I think tonight it's only going to be the low is only going to be in the 40s instead of the low 30s and upper 20s that it has been. So things will get back to normal and we can enjoy why we moved to Florida or why we live in Florida. Um, Lot going on. Been a busy week. Keeping busy at work and stuff like that. You know, like I said, started a new contract. Um, but everything's been wonderful. I say, hey, Leonard, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. We've got Venzulo and Sharon, of course. Sharon always is the first one to pop in. That's awesome. Um, so we're not going to waste a whole lot of time. I want to get right into talking to Aleks. A lot of you guys know Aleks. He really doesn't need an intro. He's very well known, a fantastic researcher. He's just traveled everywhere we wish we could go. And so it's really a great honor to have him on the show and to talk about what he's doing in the Bigfoot community and pick his brain and stuff like that. So no further ado, I'm going to bring on Aleks. Hey, Aleks, how you doing, buddy?
Hey man, good. Thanks for having me on. Good to be with you.
No, like I said, it's an honor, and so glad that we were able to make contact with each other and talk about it. And you were, so welcoming and said, yeah, absolutely, you would do the show. We just had to work out the fine tuning on days and times, but that's easy to do. You know what I mean? So
No, I appreciate it. I just want to shout out I see Sharon. I believe that's a familiar name. I've seen her in quite a bit of our chats as well, and my show over the years. And Venzulo, that's actually buddy Ryan. I know him personally. So how's it going, Ryan? Good to see you guys.
yeah,
And had everybody else. I just don't know everyone personally. So
yeah, and everybody periodically, I'm going to throw a link into the chat room, and we'll get into what that link is, but you will see that periodically in the chat room. So Aleks, let's start off with, because everybody knows you, but let's deep dive into you yourself. You know what I mean? And I know you're a part of this. To me, it's a bush because small town monsters really branches off into so many different directions with different people's
right.
research and the way they do things and stuff like that. How did that come about? How did small town monsters come about, and how you got involved in that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of been interesting because I've been involved now with Small Town Monsters for almost 10 years. So it's kind of interesting how it's developed into what it is now. Basically, back in the day, Seth Breedlove, who started it, did a documentary. And I was telling you a little bit about it before we got on the show, but a documentary about this local Bigfoot case he was familiar with in East Ohio, where he's from, called the Minerva Monster. It was this case from the 70s, very kind of typical of that era Bigfoot story, people in town having encounters with stuff. And so he made a film about that. And then he just started doing documentaries about stuff that interested him in the Bigfoot world. He did Beast of Whitehall, which is one of my favorite cases too, about Whitehall, New York, and the Abear Road incident, which involved police officers seeing this creature. And I met Seth. It's funny. I made this like short Loch Ness documentary in 2015 I think it was 2015. It was terrible. I mean, it was like, I can't watch it now looking back over a decade. I'm like, oh gosh, that was so bad. But I went to Loch Ness. Yeah, it's and I think, as a creator, you're also critical of your own stuff, probably more so than the average person might be. But I went to Loch Ness back in like 2014, 2015. And then I made a little film about it because I was always interested in the Loch Ness Monster. It's funny, I actually came out more skeptical of Nessie than before I did that project, which I think a lot of people might be surprised by. But I've kind of been more of a Nessie skeptic perhaps than other lake monster stories as a result. But anyway, I made this short film about Nessie and put it out, and I got an email from Seth saying, "Oh, I'd love to show this we're doing like a Minerva Monster Day event in Ohio in 2016, and I want to show this at the event." And I was like, "Oh, cool! Like, hey, why not?" So I ended up going on a road trip to West Virginia, and I went to the Mothman Festival, which is just an awesome event. That's where I first met Seth. They had a little booth there, just him and basically a couple people at the time, because he was basically it. He was just Small Town Monsters. And then the following weekend after that was this Minerva Monster Day event that he was hosting, and we ended up screening my film and a couple other films as well about cryptids, and that's how we kind of struck up a friendship. And then eventually he asked me if I would be interested in doing a docu-series for Small Town Monsters. So again, at the time, it was just him. He was doing documentaries. He had done a couple of them. He was starting a Mothman documentary. He was doing Beast of Boggy Creek, kind of about Falcon, that whole area. And he said, "Hey, would you be interested in maybe doing like a docu-series?" And possibly, we thought about some topics, and it so happened I had an opportunity at the time to go hang out with a researcher named Bill Dranginis, who has passed away since. He was a phenomenal guy. He was a Bigfoot researcher actually back in the day in the 90s. He had a really interesting sighting in Virginia while metal detecting a Civil War battlefield with 3 off-duty FBI agents, and they all had a Bigfoot encounter. They were so frightened they actually ended up drawing their sidearms. He became a Bigfoot researcher, but then later on also got involved in investigating the Lake Champlain mystery. So he had invited me. I met him through some events, and we kind of struck up a friendship, and he invited me to come document his journey on the Lake Champlain. He would bring his boat up once a year, go out into the lake and do a few days of research. And he was a government contractor. He used to make these really cool cameras, and they would do these like underwater camera traps in the lake, and it was really cool. So basically I had that opportunity, and I told Seth, "Hey, he wants me to go up and kind of help out with this expedition. Maybe I could film this for like an STM series." And that's when the idea for On the Trail of Champ, that was the name of the series that we came up with. And it was like a 5-episode, just like 20-minute documentaries a piece. So about an hour total for the episode there, or a little over an hour. But that's kind of the first STM series that I did. And it kind of went from there. And that was the first, I think, non-Seth created STM production as well. And yeah, and then I don't know. This was just kind of like a passion project I did on the side. Like I wasn't doing that full time or anything, right? This was just something I was doing, aside from my regular job. I was working kind of in a more corporate setting in the Boston area and doing advertising and in the media kind of space there. So this was like stuff I was really passionate about. And I was doing freelance too at the time. And we just kept doing the STM productions. Seth was rolling with productions. I would occasionally help him be the crew on certain films. And then it got to a point, it was like after COVID hit, when we decided, hey, like we're thinking about getting more into episodic content. Because at that point, Small Town Monsters, every year they do a Kickstarter. And the idea is you raise money for productions, and it also is like a pre-order kind of campaign. People get in, they get early access to a lot of the productions. They can be executive producers, get their names in the credits and all this stuff. But up until like, the 2020s, it was basically just feature films, like feature documentaries, like Beast of Bray Road, the Mothman of Point Pleasant, a lot of the Bigfoot stuff I mentioned. Seth had started actually one, aside from my series, which is the only kind of episodic one, that was a jumping off point. And then he started a series called On the Trail of Bigfoot, which was also episodic. But we wanted to get more into doing episodic stuff. There was also On the Trail of UFOs. But basically in like the early 2020s, we talked about doing a kind of more investigative series. And he asked me if I'd be interested in doing something like that. And I was already kind of hoping to do something like that because I was doing, I've been doing amateur Bigfoot research or investigations, whatever you want to call it, since the, 2014-15. So it was kind of, now I was doing short documentaries for my own personal YouTube channel about researchers and areas here in the Northeast. But then we kind of came up with the concept of doing a show called Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, or a docu-series rather, because we had, again, established On the Trail of, which started with Champ, then there was Bigfoot, then there was On the Trail of UFOs, and there's been different iterations of that. And we decided, okay, what about Beyond the Trail? Kind of like maybe a little bit more expansive. And we basically, I filmed something locally at a local research area I've been going to for a while. That came out in like May of 2021. on YouTube, and it kind of really started getting a lot of views very quickly. And we saw, okay, people actually want to see this kind of stuff. So based off that, we started doing more episodes of Beyond the Trail. And the idea behind it basically is that it's a series that follows me on my investigations all over North America. I mean, at this point, in just the investigations, like talking to local researchers, witnesses, that sort of stuff, but spending time on location in some of these areas that have had interesting stuff going on over the years. Places like Bluff Creek, right? The Everglades, just so many different locations. I can't even list them, off the top of my head at this point, but we just kept doing that, and it started growing our kind of YouTube channel. And we noticed people really like that kind of style of stuff. And it was really fun for me because it was just a great way to spend my time traveling to some of these incredible natural locations. And, and just the reality, I think we were all at that point sick of kind of like the fakeness on TV, so to speak, like a lot of the shows. And I'm not knocking Finding Bigfoot. I know Cliff and Bobo and Renee, and I love those guys. They're great. I think, and they'll tell you if you talk to like Cliff or Bobo or Renee. I haven't talked to Matt as much, but I'm sure he'd probably say the same thing about how you're limited in a TV format. Like they really fought hard to not have any obvious hoaxing and stuff on the show. And they talk about that experience where the crew tried to pull stuff on them, and they kind of put their foot down a little bit. But they were limited in what they could do, right? They've got this big crew that's like, okay, we're going to go to a 2-hour night investigation. And then once it hits 10 o'clock, these guys are union. They got to go back to the hotels. Like, no, Cliff's like, no, I want to stay like, the whole night out here. Right? Because these guys are all Bigfooters before they got on the show. Like that was their passion. So I'm not knocking Finding Bigfoot, but there's a lot of other shows and other shows in the paranormal and cryptozoology spaces that I think are less than truthful.
They get into that quote Hollywood side of it where there's an entertainment value.
Right.
And when you have serious researchers, and then on the other side you got the producers and all these other people that are looking at the entertainment value, you're going to have that clash. You know what I mean? Where you got to find a way where they both work together.
That's what I think is the issue with the TV stuff is you got to realize, like I know people that work in the entertainment business, right? And sometimes I'll talk to them and they'll be like, oh, I'm doing like a paranormal show or whatever. But that's just a job to them. Like they're doing a paranormal, like they work in casting, right? For reality TV. This month, their production company is assigned to doing a paranormal show. Next month, it could be a show about, truckers, right? Like they don't have an actual attachment or interest to the subject matter. Whereas, which is what I think is what's different about us at STM. Like we are all very passionate about the subject matter. Bigfoot and cryptids and different mysteries. We all came from having podcasts and just being like interested in this stuff. I've been interested in this stuff since I was a kid. I used to read all, I was very much like a kind of armchair researcher for the longest time before I started going out and doing my own sort of amateur research. So I think that's a little bit of the difference between some of the TV stuff. So I think the reason why we've had such a good reception over the years is because people are kind of sick of that fake, overly sensationalized stuff you get on TV a lot. And that still continues to this day. And again, those companies, they don't have an interest in the truth. Like whatever is the most interesting and entertaining, like History Channel is certainly guilty of this. They have a lot of shows that I think have deliberately lied to people about topics, but doesn't matter, right? Because it's interesting. Like it still generates revenue, it generates attention and that sort of thing. Whereas, no, I actually care about the truth of the subject. Like, and, when I go out and do my investigations, I'm pouring 100% of myself into this. One, I'm risking my life in these environments a lot of times, right? I have no need to add any fake crap into it, right? Like add a kind of contrived narrative. I don't need to do that. And that's exactly what Bigfoot Beyond the Trail has been over the years, is just like, take it or leave it. This is what it's like when somebody goes and spends a week in the woods in Alaska, or pick the location, whatever. If I have something happen, I will share it. If not, I'm not going to up the drama just because it's more interesting. Like I don't really need to do that. Clearly, I don't need to do that because we have I think we've received quite a bit of attention regardless. It's like you don't have to be faking stuff to have people interested in your documentaries and that sort of stuff. So that's, I think, been a differentiating mark. But I guess absolutely. To kind of
and that's what makes it real. That's what makes it real, because it's you know the second you pull up to a location and you get out and you're unpacking, you know there's a higher probability that you're not going to get anything,
Right.
you know,
Most of the time, yeah,
and
and most of the time
but
nothing
you're
happens.
yeah. So, but you're being real about it and saying, "Hey, it is what it is." But and that's like when I do my research, I'm the same thing. I'll say at the end of my video that we didn't get anything today, but God, what a beautiful day it was. You know what I mean? It's a
Yeah.
win-win, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh
And
yeah.
you know, and people need to see the beginning and the end where you're showing them what goes into it. You got to set up camp, and you're gonna be hiking. It might be raining. There's times I've watched your show, it's freezing cold, or you guys are in the rain. Where I'm sitting there thinking I'd probably be in my tent right now, kind of chilling
Oh yeah.
and waiting to see if the rain stops. But nope, you guys are like, nope, let's throw on the ponchos, let's
We
get
got to
out
do
there,
it.
and
It's like we
and
made it
people.
this far.
Yeah, and people see that. That's real. See what I'm saying? And if you do capture something, you highlight it and you say, this is what we caught. Without throwing it out there, that was a Bigfoot. You're like, this was interesting, or this is what we caught. You're allowing the people to go on this ride with you. And not only that, I think the people notice that you guys eat pretty good. You guys come prepared. You guys cook some good food. I'm a beans and hot dogs the whole time I'm freaking camping, but you guys are
Yeah,
making some
it
pretty
gets
good food.
you got sometimes when you're out there for a long time, you got to be careful because if you're eating the same thing, it's like it can get old, or you get the runs while you're camping. That is not fun. So we can only do so many
No,
mountain house MRE type stuff, rations before you start getting sick of it. But yeah, again, I think it's part of it is just looking back on it now. Again, it's just this is like the reality of what it's like. Like I tell people all the time in my videos, like, don't trust me. Think about it yourself. Like, here, I'll present you this weird audio we got. Like last year in West Virginia, where I'm setting up a saddle hunting tree stand I'm going to use in the middle of the wilderness, and all of a sudden there's like sounds like somebody screams on camera. None of us heard that scream.
hmm
I don't know what that was. Like, I don't think it was a person because there was no one around us and everyone was
right,
accounted for in our group. And I presented that. I'm like, I have no idea. Like, don't take my word for it. I'm not. I think the problem is, especially when it comes to the Sasquatch topic, is that there's too many people out there who speak in absolutes, where it's like, as
right.
a matter of fact,
Oh,
Sasquatch. Oh, this was definitely a Sasquatch. Like this tree break, and
I have
I didn't.
said that 1,000 times.
I've gotten a lot of
I'm right
flack
with you.
actually.
Absolutes.
Yeah, I've gotten flack over the years because I'm very harsh on evidence because I think people get conflated. They conflate evidence and proof, right? So proof is like, oh, this is undeniable. Like there is a Sasquatch. Evidence is up for interpretation. And the problem is too, people get emotionally attached to their evidence, so that when you are skeptical
hmm
of it or offer alternate explanation, a lot of times people get very angry and agitated because they think you're attacking them
They get it.
personally. Because I
Yep.
get it. I've had stuff that's been happened to me too that I thought was like really interesting, and then I send it to somebody I trust, and they're like, "Yeah, this actually sounds like this that I've recorded before, which is like a natural phenomena." And it's a bummer, but I'm not going to be like, you know what, you're wrong. Like you're just doing this because you're jealous. Like I don't think that's the way
Right.
a responsible researcher should look at things. So that's I think part of it too. With my videos, like there are literally my videos. I don't I'm not told to add any kind of drama or any craziness or anything like that. And I think that's what people enjoy is the just the journey. And that's a big part of it too, is just like showcasing what it's like. And, we go out to Alaska for a week, like when we were up there in August in area A up there, and it was just rained for like the majority of the time. And like, there's nothing you can do about it. Like we'll get people criticizing us. Like,
Right.
did you guys look at a weather report? And I'm like, well, first of all, these trips are planned like 2 months ahead of time.
Right.
Going to Alaska is not a cheap thing. So, you get there and it rains all week, and if you're in a temperate rainforest, like there's nothing, the rain forecast can say a month ahead of time, it's going to be nice. That doesn't mean anything. Right. So it just goes to show you can't control the weather. And like, we don't have a hotel to run off to, like maybe some of the,
Right.
kind of mainstream productions do when they don't camp out in the woods and that kind of stuff. We really do what we do. Like I did the Journey to Ape Canyon, which came out last year, which was like our trek to Ape Canyon. You can see how dangerous that whole terrain is. Like we don't have stunt doubles. We don't do any of that. It's just all like literally just me and whoever's with me, whether it's friends or crew. And my buddy Brian, who's frequently in a lot of the videos, Brian Garvey, he's Brian and Chewy. He's got the dog Chewy. A lot of times in our videos,
Right.
we came up with a kind of, because a lot of times we'll go out on these trips and it'll rain. We were on this trip in Florida and it was pouring torrential downpour. In West Virginia last year it was raining, like all these places, and we kind of call it embracing the suck. Sometimes you're just so far gone. You're out there, you're making a pancake on a morning fire, and all of a sudden it's torrential downpour, and you're sitting there just soaking and miserable, and you're like, sometimes you just got to embrace the suck and just say, this is it. Like we came out here for a reason. Like you remember those moments, like they're not fun in the moment, but it's you remember it afterwards as like a pleasant memory. It's kind of funny stuff to embrace. So
Yeah, I've found myself in similar situations, and being in the military, we use that term a lot. Embrace the suck. But, I sit and I'll I try to put things in a perspective where, okay, look at where I'm at. It's pouring down rain. I'm cold. I'm pretty miserable. But what was it like 100 years ago? See what I'm saying?
Exactly.
When one person versing to a states away by foot or by horse with no idea of what the weather is going to be like. I at least can pull up my smartphone and see how long it's going to last.
Exactly.
They had nothing. See what I'm saying? They may go 3 or 4 days without eating other than maybe some beef jerky because they can't make a fire. You know what I mean? So I try to put it in perspective and say, okay, it isn't so bad because at a snap of a finger, I can pack everything up, get in the car, and go home.
That's a great way. Yeah, it really makes you appreciate the kind of how hardy and tough people were back in the day, right? Like they would get to, even now, like you go to some of these locations. Yeah, I saw that. That's funny. Yeah, I've been exposed. I do have a stunt double. No, wouldn't that be nice? No, I do all my own stunts, right? Often to my detriment, because we get in a lot of crazy situations. But when you're like a few miles up into the backcountry, you think about it. Like you said, you're sitting there and it's really cold or it's really rainy and you're miserable. And it really makes you appreciate. And I've done a lot of backpacking and hiking over the years, like beyond what I've filmed and beyond the trail. Like I've done that for a long time before that. It always made me appreciate when you're out there miserable and like you think about, well, I get to go home, nice warm shower, nice bed. Like you really appreciate that kind of stuff more so. And then, like you said, it makes you think about 200 years ago, these pioneers, the mountain men, the Native Americans, like all these different people, they didn't have that luxury. They could get into like a makeshift shelter or something that they had built, a longhouse, but they really lived rough and off the land, and they were amazing people for it, of course, right? They were so much grittier than we are nowadays. Whereas most people, I have like family and friends that they're like, you actually enjoy going camping and like you sleep out in the woods. Like they're shocked by this proposition. I'm like, sometimes I sleep better in those situations than I do like in a hotel room, right? Like, so after a long day of hiking,
raining and I'm in my tent. Yeah,
that's
if
a nice
it's raining
feeling.
and I'm in my tent, I sleep pretty good.
I actually sleep very well in my car in like rainy situations. Something that does bother me is like when you're out in the mountains and it's really windy. I have trouble sleeping when the wind is like flapping on the tent. Like that's just such a pain, Most of the time I sleep fantastic out in the woods, either in a tent or, like car camping. Sometimes we'll do that. It just really depends on the situation. Like, when we were up at Ape Canyon, you got to hike like 5 miles just to get to the start of the canyon. And we were up there for a few nights and I slept fantastic because all day you're trudging around exploring. So by the time you hit the hay, you're just like zonked out. You're ready to sleep, and phenomenal sleep up there in the mountains. You hear like the crickets and stuff like that. So I enjoy that. But I think it's just a very big part of it is just the being there and the experiencing in the moment.
Yeah, sometimes I like the rain or anything because if it's quiet, I focus on everything while I'm laying there. I focus on
do that
sound,
too, actually.
everything. But when it rains, it kind of erases it. It's like, okay, I can't hear anything other than the rain, so now I can sleep because I don't have to.
It's a little bit more reassuring, perhaps. I know that feeling, but I at the same time, I actually I get really excited when I do hear, like I'll a lot of times, especially if it's quiet, I'll lay in my tent at night and just listen for like an hour. I'll even put on these like little bionic headphones that like kind of amplify sound, just to listen and see if I can hear anything. We'll have audio rolling, and heard some interesting stuff that way. There was one time in Alaska up at Area A where we were camped up on this ridge where we had heard some stuff, some possible knocks, and it would sound like rocks being thrown. We decided to camp up on this ridge. And it hadn't rained that whole week we were there. It was our first trip to Area A. And then, of course, that one night it started drizzling when we were up there on this ridge. There's brown bears, other stuff around, right? There could be anything. That's the night we started having stuff happen. We were hearing what sounded like stomping, like something stomping and knocks, kind of stuff being thrown. But then it would start drizzling rain, and you'd stop hearing it, and you're like, "Oh my God, go away, rain!" Like I just want to hear, And I'm trying to get out with the thermal to see what we're looking at. That was kind of a frustrating experience, but. Yeah, most of the time when it's super rainy, you're not going to hear anything. It's a little easier, but a lot of times, especially if I've been alone, it's tough. Yeah, it's tough on audio, but when I've been alone, it's the most kind of nerve-wracking when you're out there alone and you're listening to because you're heightened awareness. When you're with other people, I think you're a little bit kind of more at ease because there's other people that experience it with you. But so that's a good time. I was mentioning that. Is there time that you really creeped out your surroundings? I mean, yes and no. I'd say again, when I'm alone, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily more creeped out, but I'm definitely, when you're alone, you feel more vulnerable, more aware, because you don't have another person there to kind of joke around with and talking, and you hear something, you're kind of more on edge because you're alone. You have nobody else to watch your back. So there's definitely been times like, especially down in, I was in the Honey Island Swamp in Louisiana. I was doing some solo stuff. I was kind of like almost pushing myself. But there, it's like you have all these different sounds, and there's all the wildlife and animals that are making noises in the swamp, and you're out there alone. You're kind of like, man, what am I doing here? And then you'll hear like something crazy, huge splash in the water, probably a gator or a big fish or something. It kind of catches you off guard. Definitely more on edge in those moments when I'm alone. I don't, there was even a time when in the Smoky Mountains where I backpacked like a couple miles to a backcountry shelter near Fontana Lake on the North Carolina side of the Smoky Mountains. And you're alone, and like the crickets and the cicadas go all night. So you almost can't hear anything, which is very kind of disconcerting being alone. And once it started getting dark, I was getting very creeped out, and it was very hard to make a fire because of how humid it was. Like I was making a fire, but I was constantly having to focus on trying to keep the fire going, and it was exhausting. So I kind of was just like, you know what, I'm just going to give up and get in my tent soon. And it was just so loud with the bugs and everything, but you're like very on edge because you're thinking like there could be, and I was in a little valley, so anything could be watching me really from any point. But yeah, I say that times
I do that because most of my camping is by myself as well, and I'll do something like a 3-day 4-night type thing or vice versa, and I have to go every night when things start to get creepy. The sun goes down, the environment changes and stuff like that, and I have to go through this mental thing with myself that you got this. Just chill. You're constantly relaxing yourself, trying to get that what was that out of your mind. You know what I mean? And try to tell yourself, oh, that was interesting, and try to make it more palatable. And so being by yourself, it is difficult. I prefer to be out there with somebody else, like you said, that would have your back in case of an injury or in case something happens and stuff like that. It would be best to have somebody that can at least run and get help.
Yep. Yeah. Tennessee, Kentucky Bigfoot has a comment. It says Smoky Mountain requires backwoods campers to stay at dedicated backwoods spots. Can't really get off trail technically. Yeah. So that's when I was there. I actually hiked to there's dozens of these backcountry camps throughout the national park. You get like a permit for them. So I had a permit. But I hiked alone. So I didn't really go much off trail. I went and actually like swam a little bit in Fontana Lake because the water's pretty high at that time of year. This was like in July. But just being back there alone, and there's like nobody, I didn't run into anybody else hiking. And I maybe hiked like 3-4 miles round trip. I didn't run into anybody else in that section of the park I was in. I purposely picked an area I thought there wouldn't be very many people, especially in July, which I learned. I'm from the Northeast, and up in the mountains in July, like it gets nice and cool at night, not as humid. I was thinking like, oh, I know Tennessee's really humid, but if I go into the mountains, maybe it'll be better, right? Wrong. It was so humid. I don't think I've slept worse camping. And I woke up in the morning, looked like I got beat up or something like that, because it was the bugs going all night. And I understand now why I was the only person backpacking out there alone. And just in general, I didn't run
Yeah.
into anybody else. Everyone was in town, trying to stay cool. Whereas I was like, oh, this was before the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot conference, so I was speaking at that conference, and I decided to take a trip and do a little filming before the event. But yeah, I realized quickly that the mountains down there very hot in the summertime. So yeah, that one I didn't do a whole lot of
Well,
beyond the trail, but just the virtue of being in such a remote area and not having anybody else was creepy enough. And again, because when you're alone, you have to rely on yourself. Not that you don't otherwise, but like you twist an ankle, something goes wrong, and you're in the backcountry alone. Like you have to then that's a added danger. Whereas if you're at least with one other person, you might be able to fare a little better. I don't typically prefer, especially more remote areas, going out alone, but um, it's just kind of
yeah.
I challenge myself, but not to a point where it's like dangerous or anything like that.
Yeah, I
Like I
get it
did,
asked all the time is what do you fear? You know what I mean? And I'm like, it's not Bigfoot, it's everything else out there that could do you harm. Being
that's
here
the
in
thing
South
too. Yeah,
Florida, I worry about hogs, wild pigs, because they will definitely do damage. And two, stepping on or stepping near a water moccasin or a rattlesnake that I didn't see.
yeah, that's
Things
definitely
can change really
disconcerting.
quick.
Yeah, when I was doing this past summer, and I was in Alaska for a few days, I was alone and doing some hiking in some areas outside of town in the mountains in Alaska, and it started getting a little bit dark. And you're very bear conscious. Like I was every couple hundred feet, I was like, hey bear," because they have big coastal brown
Right.
bears around Anchorage there. So you can even like we even went to places near where my buddy Rob Roy Menzies lives, just outside of he lives up in the mountains, and like down the street from him, people get attacked by brown bears and dragged, and all kinds of stuff. So you got to be really aware of the threats that are out there. And another thing is people too. I'm a proponent of being armed in the woods, like when legally available, of course. I have to preface with that. Because there's some states that have really bad gun laws, but we won't get into that.
Yeah.
But just I always like to be armed. I've run into some strange characters over the years in the woods, like
Okay.
strange people. A couple times in Florida too, ran into some weird stuff. Once in Oregon, you just never know. I mean, with wildlife, it's one thing, right? Like, um, I live in moose country, so even like going out to the woods near my house, I've got moose and bear, like just black bears. Which I ran into one getting the mail over the summer, and I screamed at it and it ran away. But it's still not fun. Like 20 feet from a black bear just getting the mail. We got moose and stuff, but we got little ticks. They're a really big threat around here. Lyme disease, that kind of stuff. But wildlife is one thing. Down south, of course, I'm very aware of the snakes. Like being down in Louisiana and Florida, I've seen cottonmouths and that kind of stuff. And it's threatening, but wildlife, you can generally kind of predict its behavior somewhat,
Hmm.
whereas people are, I think, a lot more unpredictable than wildlife. So that's why you always got to be careful out there with strange people in remote areas you can run into. Like we ran into some weirdos out in Oregon a few years ago in the Mount Hood National Forest, and these people, I don't know what they're up to, but they were giving off like satanic vibes to us. And then one of the guys kind of like tried to circle our camp, and it was just a really weird, strange encounter. Not something you want to necessarily run into out there in the woods. So,
Yeah, um, you know, and that's one of the things. And to talked about it is, I mean, because your travels, and we talk about the reason you're out there is Bigfoot. That's the reason. That's the star of the show. That's what you're hoping and crossing your fingers that you can get some
right.
footage of, some photographs, some evidence, and so forth. But the environment is the co-star, and I loved it when you mentioned that when we were talking. The environment is the co-star, where people see the environments that you guys are going into, or any research channel if they're watching the researchers, the environments that these people get themselves into to look for this elusive creature. And that's what really draws me to a lot of your stuff. And there's some other reasons, like your your ability to capture that scene, that co-star, your ability to capture it and let people experience what you're looking at. If it's either it's drone footage of the mountains with the fog settling in, or it's amazing that you capture that co-star.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean that's we've talked about it before, but that's a big part of it. I think is especially for me. I'm very interested in like facts and data. So if I do a lot of exhaustive research before I go to a place for the first time. Like, okay, I'm going to the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. I want to know what the environments are like, the acreage, the kind of habitat and that kind of stuff. I try to convey then in the video afterwards and be like, hey, look, this is the area we're dealing with, and that's when you get those sweeping shots that'll show you the mountain vistas or the swamp or whatever the case may be. The environment's a big part of it because you have to look at it this way. We're going to these places. Like, I don't, whatever you believe Sasquatch is, like, I believe there is some sort of truth to the phenomena. There's something going on. I have my theories about what I think it is. I lean more towards like relic hominid type side of things. There's obviously plenty of theories. No one is correct at the moment. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having the debate, right? It's all still speculative. But if we are going off the kind of hypothesis that it is some sort of a flesh and blood or relic hominid type of creature, what habitats would be the most suitable? And now those are the ones that I want to go and look at and try to figure out. Like, a good example of this is like the NAWAC, North American Wood Ape Conservancy. They're a group that's been around for a long time. They have this really cool like calculator thing on their website where you can go on their website and it's like a habitat. I think they call it a HIB or something like that. It's like a habitat kind of viability calculator or something like that, where you add up, okay, how many acres is the area? What type of forest are you dealing with? What are the water sources like? And from a scale of like 0 to 100, it'll give you how suitable it might be for potential Sasquatch-like creatures. Like, that's what I think you should be doing when you're looking at a research area. What is this area like? Or is there good water sources? What other types of animals are in living in this area? Like, what other large creatures could survive here? So I look at like moose are a big one I look at. I live in moose country, and going to places in Alaska and Canada, a lot of those other areas, moose typically are in the environment. And you look at a place like Maine, there's like 70,000 moose. Those are humongous animals. One of the largest, ungulates in the world, the largest of the deer family. They consume a lot of calories every day and they don't hibernate. So if a habitat can support a few thousand moose, it probably supports black bears and then all the other creatures that come after that, right? So let's say you throw a dozen Sasquatch into the mix, and like a biological, biologically speaking, I could see that functioning, right? In terms of there being enough biomass to feed those creatures. I think moose are an excellent metric, or other ungulates and black bear. I know a lot of people have drawn parallels between black bear habitat and potential Sasquatch stuff. So that's why I think getting back to like showcasing the environment, that's why I really try to do that, because I go to a place, it'd be so easy for me to just start the video. Okay, we just found what we think is a track. And it's just like, you're following us through the woods the whole time. Like, that's fine and all. Like, if you're like just documenting your search, that's cool. But I think the environment is definitely the co-star, as we kind of talked about, because, okay, let's give you some facts. Let's talk about how many millions of acres this national forest is, show you some shots. We'll talk about some history of it, this kind of stuff, the other wildlife. And then we get into going there. Here's the journey from civilization to that location. And that's when the investigation kind of starts. I think that's part of the story. And I think a lot of people are sort of accustomed to that from my videos at this point, is that I try to showcase the journey. Because for me, it's part of the adventure. I really enjoy going on these trips. We talked about it earlier. Even if you don't have anything happen, which is a majority of the time, anything unusual, so to speak, spending any amount of time in these wooded or beautiful mountainous areas is never a bad thing. Like, I don't have a bad time doing this, right? Like, I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't having fun with it, right? So I try to showcase that in the journey, and like, oh, we're going to go visit the local Bigfoot museum in town here. And maybe they'll give us some tips about, hey, go check out this area. You got to talk to this witness. Like, because I'm going to these areas, I'm not from there a lot of times, so I don't want to assume I know everything, but I really try hard to do research beforehand and then link up with locals and then show that in the films and show that in the videos. Like, this is what it's like if you go to spend a week at Bluff Creek in Northern California. And, because I'll watch videos a lot of times about these locations beforehand, and I'll be like, man, there's nothing that really makes me like, I go there, then I'm like, this is not what I expected, because nobody did these kind of shots where they showcase the natural vistas and all this kind of stuff. So I try really hard to include that element. And I think that's just, part of it for me is like, I would be doing that anyway. So being able to showcase that, I think, is really important.
Oh yeah, it's you're seeing parts of America that most people just don't or won't have an opportunity to see. And it's amazing that you can bring that to them.
That's a big part of it too. And I've gotten so many amazing messages and emails and comments over the years, people saying like they live kind of vicariously through some of my ventures. And Seth has kind of jokingly said before, like, that's kind of part of what I do now is like taking people to these places. Maybe not so joking, like that is actually kind of true. I take people to these places that otherwise they might not be able to go to on their own. Or some of the thing that really like often is very touching is when people who are older, or they have like health issues and that sort of stuff. They just physically can't go out to these places, and they're like, "Oh, I watch your videos, and like it's my favorite part of my day. It's favorite part of my Sunday, or whatever the case may be." And that means a lot to me. I'm just glad to share my ventures in general, but the fact that people enjoy it and seem to kind of enjoy that. And another aspect too that I really enjoy is when people actually, I try to inspire people to get out there too. Like that's a big part of it too. I try to tell people, go out, do your thing. Especially in this day and age, we're always surrounded by technology, and the world seems like it's getting bleaker and bleaker by the day. I think it's important to get out there and get grounded again in nature. I know for me, it's like I got to go out in nature every once in a while just to spend some time and kind of like recalibrate. A lot of people are like that. A lot of people can't just live in a city all the time. Like, I live in the woods and I still can't get enough of it. But there's been times over the years where people will be inspired to go visit locations that I've shown in videos, or they'll go on their own adventures and they'll send me pictures. There'll be like one, I got a picture from a guy in Utah. He went to this remote location. He's like, "Hey, you remember this spot from your video?" And I'm like, "Man, you hiked 6 miles into there to get to that spot. Like, that's awesome." Like, I really like that. I think it's cool because they're just making their own adventures. Maybe they have something cool happen, then they report back to me like, "Hey, I heard a wood knock here," or whatever the case may be, right? I think that's really neat. And like, especially if they have like kids or younger people with them that are then inspired to do that. Cause the younger generations are, I would say, under attack nowadays when it comes to like just constant bombardment in your face with the phones and the tech and all of these social media kind of platforms. So being able to disconnect from that is definitely a bit of a blessing. So yeah, I would say all encapsulating kind of, it's really cool to be able to share those adventures with people and have them appreciate it and inspire them to do their own, or if they're not able to, just kind of enjoy the ride. That's been really rewarding over the years.
Well, in your travels, and this will be a two-part question. One, what's the one place you would go back to? If I mean you had one and you're like, "Man, this is the spot." And what was the one time you had the moment that said, I think I'm near a Bigfoot"?
Oh, that's a tough question. That's like the favorite child question. It's like, where would you want to go back to? What's your favorite location? I mean, I would say this. I would go back to any location basically that I've been to. There's not a place I've been, blessed enough to travel to I wouldn't go back to. But if I had to choose just one, oh my gosh, that's tough. There's like 3 I could think of, but I'll just say Area A in Alaska. So this is, and I'll describe it for folks that might not be familiar with it. Area A is the kind of code name we give to this piece of property in Alaska that is on the Kenai Peninsula, which is thousands of miles of these rugged coastline, these temperate rainforests, and these rugged mountains that just jut right out of the sea, where you have, I mean, biodiverse paradise of wildlife on land with coastal brown bears, moose, Sitka black-tailed deer, lynx, gosh, so many other creatures. And then in the water, you've got seals and sea lions and humpback whales and orcas and all kinds of stuff. Sea otters, excuse me. So that's an area that, like, I've captured some of the most striking footage too, where it's like these beautiful misty mountains in the temperate rainforest. That's an area I think about all the time. I would go back there in an instant. I've been there 3 times now over the years, and any chance I get to go back, like, sign me up, kind of thing. And I would say, in terms of like, when was there a moment where I thought there was a Bigfoot near? There's been a couple, and I've never had a definitive sighting or anything where I could be like, "Oh, there's definitely a Sasquatch here." It's all speculative, and I always say this, that some of the stuff I've experienced, in my opinion, fits the kind of purported behavior that's associated with Sasquatch. So, if it is a species, it has traits and habits that all species kind of exhibit, right? But when it comes to stuff I've experienced, like also up in Area A in Alaska, like there was this one time we're sitting around the campfire at 3-4 in the morning, goofing off, and we start hearing these absolutely clear wood knock kind of sounds, and what sounds like rocks being thrown. Like you'll hear stuff like flying through the trees, hitting debris, and then we'll hit the rocky beach before it splashes into the water, happening multiple times, interspersed with these weird knocks. And you're kind of just like, I mean, what is doing this, right? Start scanning with the thermals. We didn't see anything. I mean, it was very tough, hilly terrain there where we were at. But we tried to reenact it. There's not like rocks laying around everywhere, so it could roll down the hill because it's all covered in this thick moss. But you take a rock and you try to throw it down the hill, and it just gets caught in the moss and doesn't make any sound. Only throwing it kind of overhand was the only way to really get it to do what we wanted to. But that was a weird moment. There's been a couple other times. One time in the up in Utah, we were backpacking up in the mountains in the high Uintas, which are this really interesting mountain range off of the Rocky Mountains in northeast Utah. Beautiful, beautiful country. Long history of weird reports out there with Sasquatch. But we were hiking up to this remote alpine lake. It was like 5 or so miles in out of 6. We're above 10,000 feet elevation at that point, and we kind of start taking a break, and we turn our light on, and we hear these sounds like a knock around us. So we kind of are watching, and we only had a night vision at the time. We're listening, we're filming this whole thing, turn our lights off, and then a couple minutes goes by, turn the lights on, and then another, like a really loud one you'll hear on the other side, and you're kind of like, this would only happen when we turn our lights on. Like, I mean, can I say that was a Sasquatch? Obviously, I don't know, but it was weird how it was like reacting to the lights. And then a couple mornings later, we also heard what sounded like knocks again, and we did some knocks, heard like a response back. That was a weird one. There's been other ones where like stuff happened that I wasn't aware of until afterwards. Like we'll have overnight audio recording, and then we'll hear like really good knocks or audio. Right. There was one time in Bluff Creek, Northern California, where we heard this whoop, but in the moment I thought it was a person. It was so good. And that on the video, I'm literally like, oh, like, was that Ken Gearhart? Because he was one of the guys that was there in camp with us. My first thought was like, was it a person? And then when I was able to go check with everybody, nobody was the whooper who was apparently hanging off in the woods and just let out this really clear whoop that only myself and a dog heard. Nobody else even heard it in camp because the way the distortion sounds at Bluff Creek. So that was one where I thought like, man, there could have been one there, because there was a whole series of events where this guy's dog started reacting very strangely leading up to this. The most scared I've ever seen a dog, tail tucked between the legs. Had to take a belt and use it as a leash to get him back to camp. He was so scared. Guys were saying they were hearing like wood knocks and stuff in the woods. And that's when, after we got back to camp, I heard this whoop, and I have it on video and recorded. It was just a weird one. It was like, okay. Yeah, there's been moments like just like that over the years where you're kind of like, okay, interesting. But those are probably the top where I was like, man, there could have been one in the area. Like, for all we know, there was one or multiple. Again, I have no evidence or proof of that happening, but I just have like usually the audio or the reactions on camera, for filming. Like, I'm working on a video right now. I was in West Virginia in the fall, and I went to this area in the central part of the state, and there's this big not reservoir, it's like an Army Corps of Engineer man-made lake, but it's a huge lake, and there's a long history of Sasquatch sightings around the lake. And I was just hanging out there alone and solo in this spot, and I heard this like kind of like vocals in the distance, and it just sounded like people going like, oh, like a few times. And I was filming and had audio going, and you got my reaction on camera, and I'm looking at the camera, I'm like, oh, that was kind of weird. And turns out the week before that, the local Bigfoot museum there had a report from a local who said that she heard this same kind of howling, like in the same general area, pretty remote area. I mean, I can't say there was one nearby. And then later on that night, I thought I heard maybe some wood knocks. And then overnight, I had put my thermal camera on top of my vehicle, which I was sleeping in, and I captured like 20 videos on thermal of black bears walking along the shore of this where the lake was meeting the this creek. And I was just like sleeping in my car there, and there's like a little black bear that walks by, and then there's a bigger one that comes by an hour later, and I have all the clips of them on the thermal, which is really cool. But Yeah, there's those moments where you feel like there could be something close, but I've never had like a definitive sighting or anything like that. Just these kind of fleeting, interesting moments that sort of make you think, okay, interesting. But yeah, hopefully we'll get a more definitive encounter. But that's what it is so far.
What's the next adventure that you're planning right now? What's the next up for everybody to see?
So I have a few. I can't talk about some of them because I try to keep a tight OPSEC. You might appreciate that
Right,
term.
right.
In terms of like,
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah,
ha-
absolutely.
having a platform like, I don't want to risk like, people knowing where I'm going to be at a certain time, and then
Hmm.
that could create weird issues or like issues with events happening, whatever, like you don't want somebody coming trying to hoax or
Right.
locations. But I have
No,
some
I
pretty
know
cool
exactly what
adventures.
you're saying.
Yeah, it can be tough. I've had some people that are, there's always people asking. A lot of times it's just, innocently asking, "Oh, can I come out on an expedition with you?" And I'm like, what? One, the liabilities of that would be like crazy. I don't if I don't know you, or if I haven't gotten to know you, like a lot of people, I'll meet up with them for the first time, but I've known them for years on the internet. Like if they're a researcher and I know they're credible, like I have mutual friends. Like that's one thing to meet up with them and spend a week in the woods with them. It's another thing to like some random person online. And I get the intention. People just want to go out and have a good time, but I don't know people's skill levels and that sort of stuff. I do go to a lot of dangerous locations, so
Right.
I don't want to be babysitting somebody. But I have a few adventures coming up, but one that's a really big one, probably going to be honestly my most ambitious project yet to date, is going to be called a film. Actually, its own film. It's not part of my Beyond the Trail series. It's going to be part of our 2026 Kickstarter offerings here with Small Town Monsters. It's called The Journey to Ape Canyon. Or sorry, Ape Canyon. I did an Ape Canyon film. My apologies. The Journey to Ape Island. Always getting those two confused. So Ape Island is what the kind of the nickname for Vancouver Island off the coast of British Columbia, Canada. Now that's one of the largest islands. I think the largest on the west coast of North America. Largest island. It's like a humongous area, a few hundred miles long, and we're going to be doing the film about our journey to the island, my journey, and myself and a colleague named Jason Hewlett. He's a Canadian paranormal and Sasquatch researcher. And he's going to be doing a book on it. I'm doing a film about the journey, and it's going to delve into all sorts of topics. I mean, associated with Sasquatch, there's a long history of lore there on the island. So we're going to go back to the indigenous stories. There's really rich coastal tribes there that have these traditions, that the Zonaquah and the Sasquatch, and they have these totems that depict these hairy man-like creatures, and all these kind of really interesting stories, the Bookwas and that sort of stuff, up and down Vancouver Island. And there's a lot of contemporary, really interesting encounters. I mean, this is an area that has these beautiful temperate rainforests and mountains. It's very similar to parts of Alaska, like Area A, perhaps, in terms of terrain, very hard to get to spots. So we're going to be going to some of these places, taking helicopters in, getting dropped off, doing some really ambitious stuff that's going to be part of this feature film, which is again going to be a lot more in depth than any of my previous works. It's going to be like if you take a Beyond the Trail episode times 10 sort of thing in terms of the amount of topics, or the amount of like space and stuff we're going to cover. We're going to really talk about that indigenous folklore, folks that have stories going back thousands of years, to the contemporary encounters and that sort of stuff. So that's a really big one I'm super excited for. Oh, thank you, Adam. I appreciate that.
Well, yeah, Adam's a good guy. Vancouver Island's also known for having a lot of bears, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe it has a lot of black bears. Luckily, in doing my research, it's not as big for grizzly bears, actually. For some reason, they don't get there as often, which I was very surprised by, because I've been to British Columbia before, and pretty much anywhere you go in the mainland, there's the risk of grizzly bears. I've been up to Bella Coola, which is this remote town about halfway up to Alaska. It's like a 12, 14-hour drive from Vancouver to get there. It's like midway up the coastal mountains in British Columbia, and there's grizzly bears everywhere. I mean, one of the reasons I went was there's a book, Grizzlies and White Guys, by a native hunter named Clayton Mack, who was a hunting guide, a lot of grizzly hunting stuff. He had Sasquatch encounters he talked about in his book, in the New Hulk tribe there. But Vancouver Island, luckily, doesn't have as many grizzlies, but it actually has one of the highest concentrations of mountain lions in the world. So that's another
Oh, wow.
possible threat. Yeah. And I love mountain lions. They're one of my favorite animals. I've done projects on mountain lions here on the East Coast. They're starting to kind of move back here, and they're sort of a cryptid on the East Coast. I've done stuff on the Florida Panthers. I've actually reported multiple track finds that we found in the Everglades to the Florida Wildlife Commission. They have a panther tracker on their website where it's really cool. I think we need something for Bigfoot. We're almost like a Bigfoot mapping project, but if you find evidence of a panther, either a photo or a track find, you can send it to the Florida Wildlife Commission. They have a biologist look at it. If they determine, oh, it is panther, they'll put your photo up on the website. You can put the rough location of where you found it on the map. And I've done that multiple years in a row, which is really cool. But yeah, back to Vancouver Island, there is a lot of mountain lions there. So we're obviously going to be aware of that. And what they say about mountain lions is, I've been around mountain lion country, and I've never seen one in person, right? Like I've never seen a wild mountain lion, but I guarantee you one or maybe multiple have seen me. That's one of those things with mountain lions is they say, just because you haven't seen one doesn't mean they haven't seen you. I think that's what people who live in the Western US and Western Canada and maybe South Florida, they kind of have to contend with that because they're definitely out there. So yeah, Vancouver Island is going to be amazing. Just the sheer amount of Sasquatch stories, like going back centuries, is incredible. The native folklore there is amazing. So we're going to use the indigenous lore as kind of like the grounding point for the film. That's what a lot of the stories and most of it's going to be, us traveling from location to location, spending time in areas that have had history of activity and talking to people who have had encounters. So I'm really excited because I think it's going to be the most encapsulating work on Vancouver Island to date. I mean, maybe I'm setting a pretty, big challenge for myself, but we're very excited for what we're going to be doing with that project. Like we're going to be spending 2 weeks on the ground for filming, just to give you an idea of how long of a process that's going to be, because it's a huge island. And I think each area has its own kind of interesting lore and legends. And, again, stories from the indigenous to contemporary. Like we talk to people who are just professional outdoorsmen who have had encounters out there. They want nothing to do with the Bigfoot topic, but they've had encounters out there. And those are the kind of people that I think have some of the more credible encounters, like ones that aren't even looking for it. So that's going to be a Journey to Ape Island. And that's part of the 2026 Kickstarter campaign that we are doing. So that's going to be a film that's going to be going to like streaming services and DVD and that sort of stuff.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that Kickstarter and how that works. I put the link in the chat room. So people can see that. And I'll also at the end of this, I'll post it as a on my site, not just this one, on the other one as well, as a photo, so people can see the link and check it out. And talk about it. What is the Kickstarter? How it benefits you, and what they can do.
Yeah, so the Kickstarter is kind of an annual thing that we've been doing Small Town Monsters really since the start. So we are a completely independent production company. Like we're not owned by some giant corporation or anything like that. We're all independent kind of creators. There's really not a lot of us. There's myself and a handful of other people that are behind all the creative works you see at Small Town Monsters. I have my own projects that I do that are under the Small Town Monsters umbrella, but we work together a lot too. Like we were just in the Midwest filming a On the Trail of UFO series, talking about some of the most high profile, like military UFO incidents, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, like that kind of stuff. So we collaborate a few times a year together, but a lot of times we're all doing our individual shows and series. And mine happens to be Beyond the Trail, but I've also done Appalachian Bigfoot Files, Strange Places. But we also have these kind of flagship films we do every year, which are mostly to streaming and DVD. And basically what the Kickstarter allows us to do is it funds the creation of these films and all the episodic content you see on YouTube and any of the other platforms that you see this stuff on. And it functions like a pre-order. So for anyone who, it's not just like a donation. That's not at all what it is. It's you are getting in and you choose the reward level you want to be at. So like, okay, I want to do this, and you get your name in the credits of all the YouTube productions and all the films, and you get advanced digital copies and DVDs of all the films. So a lot of times people that join the Kickstarter, they see these films months before anybody else gets to see them, before like their public release dates. And there's often tons of other rewards, all kinds of stickers and shirts and goodies, and you pick different tier levels. So and that's really cool because it's very interactive for people. It's not just like, again, you're actually kind of like a part of it. You're choosing different levels to back at. And we're really lucky. We have a really loyal base of followers that they all love getting in on that. And again, I'd say primarily functions like a pre-order campaign, because you're basically getting, like, the moment I finish filming the Ape Canyon, excuse me, I keep saying Ape Canyon. The moment I finish editing the Ape Island film and it is ready, like the final version is done, let's say hypothetically that's like the end of summer, right? When that's done, once we've kind of all looked at it, the first people who get to see it are the Kickstarter backers. Like, they get their digital copy sent in the mail, where they get a password and they get to check it out, and then they can watch it. And then, when the DVDs come out after that, they get copies of those. And then the film might not even be out until like the following spring to the general public. So you're getting access to all that, and you're not only a part of helping it be possible, but you're also helping us stay independent, of course. And, so we don't have to deal with the kind of the constraints that you see with a lot of the other kind of TV and that sort of stuff, where it's, we're all kind of frustrated by that. And that's sort of the Kickstarter summed up. So we just launched the Kickstarter campaign last night, and I mean, we're at like 90-something% funded for our goal. So we're pretty close to the finish line. And then we do extended goals as well as the campaign continues, usually for about a month. But again, it's just a great way to get in on kind of the ground level and really be a part of some of this and help it be possible. And then obviously there's a lot of rewards you benefit from. Again, it's not just handing off money. It's you're getting a lot. You actually get a lot for that money. Like we get pictures. I'll get pictures sent to me by folks that have backed the campaign. Like, oh, I just got the rewards dump, and it's like a big giant kind of folder, and it has like 5 DVDs in it, and a book and a shirt and a bag, and like it's like a giant big bundle of stuff you get that are really unique, because we don't do those. A lot of the stuff for the Kickstarter too, they'll be like Kickstarter exclusives where they're not out for like the general public. We don't really sell them or anything like that. It's just like a one-time sort of thing. There's unique artwork that sometimes gets added in. Like there'll be artwork that's done for the productions that will be part of like the Kickstarter rewards, like depending on what reward level you back at. So there's a little bit of something for everybody, I think, in something like that. So yeah.
That's awesome. And I don't think you've never not met your goal. I mean, if you just kicked it off last night and you're at 90% already, that's just amazing. And it goes by, people know the quality of work that they're going to receive. They know when they watch this, the quality that you put into it. And do you do it all? I mean, we know you're in the field. You're out there, as a part of the expedition itself. But once you get home, are you the only editor, the only guy doing the sound, or do you have a team that you work together to produce these fantastic films?
Yeah, so I mean, my productions, I'm the only one editing them, really. That's like Beyond the Trail, Strange Places, Appalachian Bigfoot Files, any of the series stuff you've seen me do, that's me. Like, I do the sound, I do everything. There'll be times like where we film a production where like Seth films or I filmed something for a series that Seth is doing, so he ends up editing that. But it's just me like doing pickup shots or whatever. Like, I'm not, but all the stuff that's under my kind of label is all me editing. And we obviously have, Seth as an editor. We have other people too that edit with us, part of the crew. And like Seth or Heather and Courtney and Aaron, they've started their own kind of like investigation Bigfoot series. None of them really edit that. Like Seth actually edits some of that stuff together. So like they go out and do their field stuff. And then I just don't think I could do that, because like I know what my investigations are like and what happens. And I always have kind of a vision of how I'm going to edit them together. So I have a hard time trusting maybe other people to to do that sort of stuff. But
I see that in your films because I've done it myself, where I've gone out and said, you know what, today I'm out here for 4 or 5 hours. I'm going to do a production. I want to do something. I got it in my mind what I want, and I'll go home and I want to edit this and do it and blah, blah, blah. Granted, nowhere near the level that you do. But even at my level, it's so much work. And I can just imagine when you're out there and you got to stop and say, hey, this is a good spot to shoot some B footage. I this canyon or the way that things look right now, I want to capture this. And then you got to stop, pull everything out, set it up, get this set, film it, and then remember it because you got to find it later, to say, I want this specific shot.
Oh, yeah.
And then audio. Audio is the worst, because if you put out audio for 20 hours, you've got to turn around and listen to 20 hours worth of audio. And
That's a tough
so
one.
audio is my Achilles tendon.
That is definitely a tough one. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think to me at this point, like on the filming side of things, it's almost like second nature. I just am so used to doing it that I just like I'm filming so much of the time, and most of that footage honestly doesn't even end up in the productions because obviously, you're out somewhere for like 3-4 days and you're cutting that into a 1 hour film. There's a lot that's just going to like hit the cutting room floor, as they say, right? Like it's not going to make the cut. You got to kill your darlings. You may love every shot you got, but only a certain amount will work.
Right.
I try to include as much as I can, of course, because like I said, I am filming a lot though. But when you're filming with a drone and a camera, a camcorder, a GoPro,
Right.
there's a lot of stuff you got to go over, so you can't fit it all. But audio is definitely a tricky one because I'm always doing overnight audio and a lot. I do a thermal overnight too, where I put a thermal camera out overnight. That's very time consuming. So what I'll typically do for like the audio is I will go into Audacity and go to spectrogram, and I'll just sit there for a couple hours and just skim through. And if I find anything interesting, I copy that, put it into another project, and export it. And if I find anything interesting, I usually send that to people that I trust in the audio field that look at Sasquatch audio, and I'm like, hey, can you tell me what you think about this? And if that's worth sharing, like I have, I'll give you an example. This West Virginia one I'm editing right now, where I have this audio where I got these vocals. Like I will be showing the spectrogram of the vocalization. First, you'll see me on camera reacting to it, and then I have the audio of it because it's a little cleaner than me talking. And then I have overnight audio of stuff breaking around and moving. But then I'll show the thermal footage of the bears, and I said, well, some of those knocks or like crashing sounds easily could have been these bears coming in and coming to the shoreline, because I have video of them coming out of the woods and doing it. So that could be some of the audio. But yeah, I do spend a lot of time with that. And honestly, one of the biggest things I spend time with, like non-Bigfoot related, is music. I'm really particular about what music I choose. And that can be really tough times because like you'll spend 30 minutes on you'll spend 30 minutes looking through some of the music you have selected, and you're like, I don't think any of this works. And I that's kind of a bit of maybe my Achilles heel is like the music side of things. Maybe I spend more time than I need to, but I think good music is just like good flow for the video. And again, because I am, I'm making a documentary that has you got to have the journey and the elements with it. And I think a good soundtrack is a very important part of that. But obviously I'm not going to have music playing over when we're like hearing stuff like, oh my God, do you hear that? Like, and there's like dramatic music. Like, no, I'm gonna, we have audio rolling so that I can then show that audio afterwards if we weren't stupid enough to not turn the audio recorder on, which has happened a few times, or it's gone dead and audio issues. But luckily we capture a lot.
I'll be hiking and I'm running equipment all the time because you never know when something's going to happen. But sometimes I'll stop, and I do things in small increments because it's easier to edit. 5 minutes.
I get that too. Yeah,
an hour at a time. So there'll be a point where I will only run for 60 seconds, and I do it for that specific time because I know that's where I just want to capture the area, put some music to it. Or make a short or something like that,
Right.
So when I go through all my audio or my video files, I see the 1 minute ones, and I know what those are. You know what I mean? And I can slip them in and do certain things and stuff like that. But Tennessee, Kentucky Bigfoot brought up something. He said sound has to be digitally so you can visually go over it. Well, here's the problem I have with Audacity. And I'm still trying to learn it. Boy, Audacity is my worst enemy right now. But I was in Ohio. I'd done some audio, and I was going through it. It was 8 hours worth of audio. So I throw it in Audacity. I'm going through it. And yes, you can see visually where sound are. But there's a lot you miss that doesn't show up.
Yeah.
So you're still caught listening to every single 8 hours.
That's the problem. And what I've kind of done to get away from that is my philosophy is if I'm not hearing something or if I'm not seeing something that's prominent, it's usually going to be very distant. And like a lot of times, and over the years, I've had that happen too, where like I miss something and like, okay, let me listen very intensely. And I'll listen and I'll hear like a very distant knock or a vocal, but like even amplified, it's so so much of like a question, like what could it be, that I sometimes don't even try to highlight those. Like in the videos at least, like I will make a note of them for myself because that's always something I can go back to. Or if somebody's doing something audio related and they're like, "Have you ever heard of this?" Like, yeah, here, take this. But usually in the videos, I'll just highlight like the more, I don't want to say dramatic, but more, because a lot of times stuff you can't even hear with headphones. So like I used to do a lot of videos where I'd
Yeah.
put the audio and like people complain they couldn't hear it. I'm like, oh, you should wear headphones for it. But I'll try to highlight the more interesting of what like happens in a given night if we have something weird happen, right? Again, that's just kind of an editorial choice because a lot of times it's like a big like, can you even hear it? Like, and I'll play it for people, you know, like my wife or other like non Bigfoot people, just like, can you hear this? And if they say like, I can't really hear anything there, I'm like, okay, I don't even know what's worth including then. If it's like that much of a stretch, not a stretch, but that
Right.
much of like a challenge. So that's also kind of, again, part of
Yeah,
it
mine's
is the audio.
yeah, mine's the opposite. Where I'm sitting, I got my headphones on, I got Audacity running, and I'm just sitting here staring because you just don't move, you know.
I know.
And I see a spike coming up, and I'm like, okay, there's going to be something there, some sort of noise. But even before I get there, something happens. I'm like, whoa, what was that? Holy crap!
Right.
And it wasn't on the screen. And so I'll rewind it, listen to it again, rewind it, listen to it again. I'm like,
And you can't see
that's
it.
pretty
Yeah.
interesting. And it's not there. So then I'm like, all the times that I skipped to the spikes, now I need to go back and listen again because the areas I skipped, there might be something there.
Well, that's a good point. Actually, something that I do now as well, which is if I do get something like dramatic, like there's a big spike, like, oh, that sounds like a pretty prominent knock, I will then go back and listen at least the first couple minutes before that. There's a lot of times like people have that do audio way better and more than I do. Folks like Chris Spencer, the Olympic Project, and others. Yeah, they're phenomenal with audio. Like they're wizards. I've heard from him and other people over the years that like a lot of times if you get like a percussive or some sort of sound, there usually is something leading up to it. So a lot of times, again, if there is something
Right.
dramatic that I can visually see, I then go back and listen. And there's a one example. I don't know. Maybe I mentioned before when we were off the show, but also back to West Virginia last April when we were there in this location with a guy named Charles Kimbrough, who makes the microphones, the Kimbrough microphones. A lot of people use them for their Bigfoot research. He's BFRO in Virginia. He has an overnight audio out, and he heard this really prominent, very clear knock. Like it was completely silent. There's just this. We all listened to it. Like, oh, this is great. But then, you know, based off what he's known over the years doing audio as well, he listened back and he found like 3 or 4 other percussives that were more distant that just barely, like you can, if you weren't looking close enough, you wouldn't even see. They do show up on the spectrogram, but they don't show up enough for you to be like, let me stop here. But because there was that big one, he was then able to go back and look and say, okay, I see that. So there's like 3 or 4 different percussives that led up to the big one. It almost sounded like there were distant ones and this one was closer. So that's another way of kind of, if you do get something interesting, because again, I know it is tough. It is a lot of time, especially for me on top of like editing the video and looking at thermal footage, like scrolling through the thermal footage and then the audio, like that's a lot. So I kind of have to cut some corners. Whereas if I was just doing like straight audio review, obviously I wouldn't have to worry about that. But I find ways to kind of like make it a little easier on myself. And that's one of them. You know, again, because highlighting something that you can barely even hear with headphones is like, you know, it's like, what can you really do with that? Whereas if you have something prominent, at least it's a little bit easier to hear and that sort of stuff. So that's, it's the challenges of, you know, balancing everything out. Cause you know, you're not only filming and you're out in the woods and doing this, but then you get back to the editing room. Cause a lot of times I'll be filming like multiple episodes on these trips, you know, I'll be gone for a couple weeks and I'll be filming like 5-6 episodes. So like I'm still editing stuff from my trip when I was in Pacific Northwest in Alaska in August. Like I still have 1 episode I have to film about that. And I've done so much since then. It's like, oh, I got to go back to what was going on then and like, you know, review everything because we had stuff happen here and like I want to make sure I get everything right. So sequentially how they come out is not how they were filmed. It's not like I film when it comes out. It's usually like I film a whole bunch and then I'm still editing stuff from a previous trip. And like that happened with this Ape Canyon, Journey to Ape Canyon, which just came out in November. We filmed that in summer of 2024. So over a year ago. And I've done so many trips and productions since then that like I had to go back, revisit that whole trip from a while ago. So that was kind of an interesting one. But yeah, there's a kind of a creative madness to it, and I've gotten used to it over the years, and I have a method that kind of works for me. And like I'm editing a few episodes now, and then I'll be doing productions in the next few months here, and it's like, and then I get back and edit. So there's kind of like a whole flow of how it works. So that's
a lot
kind
of
of
work.
that.
It's a lot of work.
It is, but I do enjoy it very
Well,
much, and I wouldn't probably wouldn't be doing it otherwise. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I tell everybody and I haven't been able to, it's been a crazy year for me, but I things are actually getting back to normal really quickly for me right now. And the so I want to get back out there and start doing what I was doing before because it is so enjoyable and it does revamp your inner batteries and I love coming home knowing I get to edit. I get to edit. It's to me it's a lot of fun and I'm not a creative person. I'm not an artistic person. I can't play a musical instrument or anything like that. So for me to create something 30 minutes long or whatever is
Right.
big for me and I enjoy it. So I can just imagine doing it at the scale that you do it, and other people that I've ran into in the Bigfoot community that also do their productions and documentaries and stuff. It's amazing. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
mean,
And
I would agree. Like, I'm the
but
same way as you. Like, I don't play an instrument. I'm not, like a painter or anything like that. This is kind of my art. Like, yes, it is documentaries, which I think are the most kind of pure form, well, not pure form of filmmaking, but they're the most unadulterated because a documentary is just you're documenting what is happening. There isn't like, you're not putting on a recreation of like a Civil War battle where it's historical pieces and it's a fictional story based on reality. No, this is what it's like to spend a week in the mountains with me. Here it is, like, and it's me condensing a trip into like an hour. And I've gotten to the point now where I'm pretty used to
right.
I have like a system. Again, there's like a creative madness how I put it all together. But that's probably going to be thrown in a loop now with this Ape Island film because that's going to be everything I do with Beyond the Trail, but so much more in depth because of the scale of it. And it's going to be, I think people who like my stuff are really going to enjoy the Ape Island film. Um,
Oh,
thank you
I
so
look
much,
forward to it.
Lori. I saw there was a question from a Tennessee Bigfoot asking if I had been to a backwood camp, Big South Fork recreational area. I cannot say I've been there. Stearns, Kentucky. I was in Kentucky back in October. I spoke at an event near Mammoth Cave National Park, and then I spent a few days in the Red River Gorge in the was it Daniel Boone National Forest. I got to check out that area. I have a video coming out on that eventually, but can't say I've been to Big South Fork. I mean, Kentucky's a big state. I've been to the LBL. I've been to another area where I got some weird thermal footage a few years ago. That's more like central Kentucky. And then I've been again to that part of like the Red River Gorge, Mammoth Cave in that area. Heard some interesting stuff in Mammoth Cave one night on a hike, like some knocks and stuff. But I mean, I also learned that copperheads, the snake, they produce a
Mm,
cucumber smell. And I did not know that. We don't have them up here. So, and the times I've been down south typically has been in the colder months. So this was more in like the pretty warm in early October. And I was told by some of the local researchers, if you smell a cucumber scent, that means there's a copperhead nearby. Usually it's like the males. I'm like, oh, really? Lo and behold, we're hiking around at night in the backwoods there, and you get this really strong, like musky kind of cucumber smell. Like, oh, that's kind of gross. It smells like cucumbers though, and I guess that's a sign of a copperhead, which is really interesting. I did not know that.
yeah, they hide so well.
Yeah.
Copperheads just into the foliage so well. So many
Oh,
things. Here rattlesnakes do too. They
I
just
bet.
that's one of my fears is stepping over a log or something like that and because we have a lot of down trees due to past hurricanes and stuff like that,
Right, right, right.
so you're always stepping over things, and that was always my fear is I'm going to step over and I'm going to get and I wear you know snake gaiters and stuff like
Snake
that when I'm
gators,
in the
yeah.
woods. People don't see me from the waist, they don't see me from the waist down, but um I am wearing gaiters and different things like that, but you still have that fear that they're not going to work.
Yeah,
you
I
know.
know. I was like a few years ago, I was with Scott Tompkins, who started the Bigfoot mapping project. We kayaked we were in the Atchafalaya Basin in Louisiana. We kayaked a few miles into this location where we were going to camp, kind of this remote spot. And we were like hiking through some areas where, you had water up to your, kind of like past your ankles. And he's like, "Hey, stop moving." And I'm like, "Oh, what?" He's like, "See that little white thing over there?" And I look at it, and there's this like little white thing in the water. It's like, that's a cottonmouth. And I looked at, and he had his crazy zoom lens on his camera. He
Hmm.
took a picture and zoomed in on it, and you see just this little mouth kind of like open like this with the little teeth. And it was a little, I guess, juvenile cottonmouth, but I was like, "Oh, I'll be damned. I've never seen one that close before." I've only seen them in like the side of the road, the big ones and stuff like that. In the Honey Island swamp, they would actually like rattle their tail pretending to be a
Right.
rattlesnake, because I guess hogs actually eat them in the Honey Island swamp. They will eat snakes, which I was kind of shocked to learn, but apparently they do. But yeah, it's interesting when you kind of appreciate the little stuff like that. Up here in the Northeast, in the areas I'm typically in Alaska and other mountainous areas, I'm more worried about the big stuff, moose, bear, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's not so much the small threats, other than ticks, which we have a whole protocol of how to mitigate that. But um, being in the swamps down south is definitely interesting. I may be going to some
Yeah.
soon, so
Snakes.
yeah,
Yeah. Let me know if you're ever down here. I'd love to meet up with you, even if it's for a day or something like that.
yeah. I've been to Florida quite a
It'd
bit
be
over the years,
fantastic.
but would love to get back.
Yeah. It's I love Florida. I'm born and raised here, fourth generation, and but I know the dangers. I know what's out there and stuff like that. So let me ask you one more question, and then we'll go. Let everybody know where they can see your stuff and get acquainted with
Yeah,
what you do.
absolutely.
If those that aren't aren't on this planet, what motivates you? What is the inspiration that keeps you motivated doing what you're doing?
I mean, I honestly, I would say part of it is
I mean, is it I want is it the truth? I just want to find the truth.
I would say there's twofold. One is I want to know what's going on with this topic, right? Like I want to have an encounter. I'd love to document something, on a thermal or whatever, and just kind of prove to myself, like, because I've talked to enough people, and I have very very good friends of mine that have had encounters that I trust them. There's something going on. I know there is. I've experienced enough where I'm like, man, there's something weird out there. I would like to know the truth myself. And I don't know if that, if I just have a sighting, obviously the thing is I'm going to doubt myself because I'm a guy going looking for Bigfoot. Like I would be willing to put myself up to the scrutiny of folks that I trust as well, who are like, they're not going to just be like, "Oh, good job. You saw a Bigfoot sighting." Like I want them to grill me to make sure I didn't like hallucinate this, or, Bigfoot on the brain. But even just having a sighting confirmation for myself, I don't think that's going to prove it. Like if I get one on thermal tomorrow, in this day and age, I don't think video or photo is just going to cut it unless it's like some really insanely good, high quality stuff. Even though you can get some high quality stuff, you'll have to go through recreations and get that looked at. I don't think that's ultimately going to prove it. I'm not necessarily trying to prove this species exists. I want to know for myself, but also that's the one side. The other side is the adventure of it. Honestly, that's a huge motivating factor. Just the idea of being able to go to some of these places, and Bigfoot aside, like you see the incredible natural wonders of the world, spending time with awesome people out in the woods, and just the camaraderie. I've been on like my brother with a lot of these adventures, and he's like a very close. He's one of my best friends, and we're brothers, so obviously we have that bond. But those are the kind of things that I think later on in life, like, hey, you remember going on that crazy trip when we drove to Alaska from the East Coast, and we were like along the Alaska highway and we're camping, there's grizzly bear prints, like that's stuff that we're going to be able to look back on forever. And just the adventure of it in the moment is really what motivates me too. And then of course, turning that into documentaries, showing people the journey along the way is very rewarding too. But I would say the two biggest motivating factors are I'm a thrill seeker adventurer. Like I just love getting in the woods and camping and doing this kind of stuff. And, in the lead up to like a trip, I think about, oh man, in like a week from now, for example, in a week from now, I'm going to be in the mountains at night, and like where we're all just going to be getting ready to go out and do a night investigation. Like that feeling is just awesome, because it's like that feeling of you don't know what could happen. Most of the time, nothing does, right? But let's say you're on that night where something happens, you hear something cool, you see something, you never know when that can happen. So that definitely is a motivating factor, just the adventure aspect of it. And of course, just, again, for myself, I don't know, even if I saw one, that's not going to really make me understand what they are, right? It's just going to, I think, make me more appreciative of being able to see something like that, because I know friends that have had encounters that they were not looking for. Like it changed their life. They were never into Bigfoot, and then they saw one, they had an encounter. Now they research. Whereas for me, I at least started at a point where like I am researching. So if I saw one, I don't think it's going to ruin my life to the extent it maybe did other people who never wanted any of this to happen, right? I would at least be like, okay, it's just confirmation that I'm on the right path, I guess maybe would be a good way to put it. I don't know, but
Right.
you hear these stories of people who get traumatized by their sightings, and I think as the topic's maybe getting a little more normalized, I think that maybe will be less of a thing. But most encounters are people who are not looking for it, not expecting it, and it either changes their life in a good way or a bad way. A lot of times in a bad way because they're either traumatized or they then get into research and trying to figure out for themselves, and it's very frustrating because they might not ever have another encounter again. I've seen that happen too. But
Right.
yeah, that's kind of the long answer to your short question.
Oh no, it's there. I don't think there when you're digging deep like that, there is no short answer. Like me, it's my motivator is sometimes I used to lay here in bed at 5 in the morning. Now I want to be in the woods by 7, and I'm tired. I worked all week and all that, and my motivator is I know this thing is out there. I
Right.
know it is, and then all of a sudden I start getting this adrenaline in me, like I've got to get out there and film. So that was my motivator: get up, get dressed, get in the car, get in the truck, whatever, and get out there. And my motivation isn't to prove it like you say. It's great if we can catch a video. It's great if we can catch a
Right.
picture. But it's the adventure.
Well,
I'm with you. It's the
here's one
adventure.
thing I will add too. You know, in saying I don't necessarily want to, like I don't want to be the one that proves it. Like if it happens, whatever, I don't care. But I think if we get something interesting, we're able then to pass that on to people that maybe have more of a scientific background or the skill sets to investigate it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we can move the topic forward in a way that wants people who bring those specialized skills, like a Dr. Meldrum or somebody else that has a John Mayenzinski,
Right.
a John Bindernagel. You take your pick, people who come from like a biology background or primatology, that they can then look at it and be like, okay, if and I've always said this whenever, and this happens too when I do get audio and that kind of stuff, I always pass it on to people I trust and ask them like, what do you think about this? Or we get a hair sample. I try to send that off to get looked at under a microscope by people who have those skills. Like I'm not a scientist. I don't pretend to be. I try to be as analytical and as critical as I can be as a citizen scientist. At the end of the day, I'm just kind of a documentarian. I'm trying my best to, absolutely, just document what is going on with my journeys. But if there's anything useful that comes out of these
Right.
trips where we find alleged evidence, I always try to pass that on to people who I think could probably make more use of that evidence or, be able to analyze it in a way that I couldn't. I think that's very important. A lot of times people, they're so caught up in trying to prove this thing exists. They don't realize that like it's, there's multi layers to it, right? Like there, maybe if you were able to move in the DNA front, maybe there's certain things we can start doing in the field that like, hey, we get access to this area and I'm going to collect an eDNA thing. You're doing a study, like I can pass that on to you and maybe you can make more use of it than I could if it's sitting at my house, right? So I think that's a really important
Right.
part of the field research part is just don't be afraid to reach out to people who have the skills that you don't, for tips, for advice, all that kind of stuff. How can you get better at collecting your samples? Because again, I'm not a scientist. I don't pretend to be. I try to be as analytical as I can, and I have no problem in passing that stuff on to others and talking to folks who do have those skills because maybe they can help bring something out of it that otherwise we wouldn't know about.
Right. So those that are watching the show and will watch the show at a later date, where can they go? What are the platforms that you put your material out there? We of course, I've seen it on YouTube and stuff, but are there any other platforms? But where can people go to see your documentaries?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest spot would be Small Town Monsters. You just Google that. It'll come with our website that has links to everything. You can go to YouTube, Small Town Monsters. But if you're looking for my stuff specifically, I've talked about. I've got a website, Petakov Media, Petakov media.com, and I just linked that because I post the links to all, and there it is. I post the links to all the individual films and stuff I talk about on there. So it can be a little daunting because we do release a lot at Small Town Monsters. Like, I'm not the only person, as we talked about. There's Seth and Heather and Courtney and other folks too that we work with. Jason up in Canada, Hellbent Holler, other people that we've worked with that they do their own series and films under the Small Town Monsters umbrella. But my stuff specifically, if you want to check it out, and my series is called Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, or Beyond the Trail, if you look that up. I've also done a series called Strange Places, which gets more into like abandoned locations, other paranormal stuff, not necessarily Bigfoot. And then Appalachian Bigfoot Files, which is less of mine. It's not so much as me investigating. It's a series I started where I wanted to document some of the interesting stuff up and down the Appalachian Mountains, from Georgia to Maine, right, kind of in between, and places like Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And it's more interviews with researchers and witnesses about alleged evidence in certain areas and that sort of thing. So I'm not really a part of it as much as I am Beyond the Trail, which is just like straight up just following me in the woods and what I do. So right. I'd say those are the easiest places. Again, Petakov Media and the Small Town Monsters. You can't really go wrong with either of those if you just Google them. That'll come up with something, and got links and stuff on there. And obviously on social media, there's links to all that on my website, and I post about a lot of the productions on there too.
Well, that's awesome. So definitely, everybody, I'll put it out there. Let me put it one more time here. Definitely check out the Kickstarter. It really helps Aleks accomplish the goals that he's trying to do each year, and we benefit from it. Not just from the great gifts that you get from being a part of the Kickstarter, but being able to visually see what he puts together, and it's pretty amazing. So if you haven't seen this stuff, you really, really do need to check it out. Again, Aleks, one of my favorites. I mean, I just love watching your stuff. You keep our attention the whole time. There's no boredom. There's no downside. You have a way of everybody's interested in what you're seeing and what you're saying and what you're capturing. And I'm a big fan. And hopefully you're able to do this for a long time, a whole long time.
I appreciate it very much. Again, it means a lot for folks to enjoy. A lot of times we're out there in the woods and, we make one of these things. And, even now I've been doing it for, we started Beyond the Trail in 2021. So it's been coming on 5 years now, probably since I filmed the first one. And it's like, I'm like, man, are people going to enjoy this and watch it? And I always kind of get into my mind about that. It's sort of silly, but, I love hearing that people are enjoying it. And again, I hope to inspire people to go out and do their own thing. Like, you don't have to just, watch what I do. Like, I hope people go out and do their own thing and their own investigations. And if you can't, I love bringing you along for the ride. And we definitely will continue doing it. Like I said, this year, especially, I have a lot of stuff planned in the moment, both Beyond the Trail and then with this Ape Island film, which is going to be, again, everything you love about Beyond the Trail, but tenfold. So it's going to be very, very intense. Very excited for this year. And we've already hit the ground running, so to speak. So there's no slowing down, but yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. And I hope you're continuously blessed. You're doing great work, and it's just, like I said, it's amazing. And I want to do anything I can to help promote it and get people like yourself, not just interested in your films, but interested in getting out in the woods. I'm not a big, there's some characters in the Bigfoot world I don't care about, because to me, they bring fear to the woods. That's their niche. And
there's fear, there's gatekeeping.
I want people, and I want people out there. I want them enjoying and camping and spending time with your kids and creating memories. I'm telling you, I don't know if you have kids, but if you do, or if you don't, you got a lot of great stories you're going to be able to tell them.
That's what I hope, someday to do that. Yeah.
Throughout this nation.
Yeah. And
you said 48 states out of the 50.
47 currently. So I have 3 states left, and I'm hoping to check one of them off the list soon here. I won't say which one just yet, but yeah, it's crazy to think 3 states. I think there's only a couple of Canadian provinces I haven't gotten to either, because I live fairly close to Quebec, and then driving to Alaska, drove through like 4 different provinces, alone. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I hope to at some point finish up the 50th state, but we'll see how long that takes. Hopefully not too long, but um, yeah, again, I appreciate you having me on, and thanks so much for tuning into my stuff, and definitely hope to see you sometime down in Florida. Again, I've been there a few times. We've done quite a few films there, and I always love going back there. I love the Florida Panther stuff. It's such an awesome thing. So Florida's
Oh
a great
yeah,
state.
I
There's
would
a
love
lot
to
of
catch
beautiful
a panther.
places. That would
Yeah,
be
that's
cool.
one of my goals is to catch a panther on film. That's
That's what I had
because
hoped too.
we know
I've
they
gotten some
exist.
tracks.
Yeah.
Actually, if you give me a moment, I'll show you one thing real quick. I just got to grab it.
Uh-huh.
I have these on display over on my shelf over there, but these are some of my favorite casts I've ever made. So there's a nice
Yeah.
Florida Panther track. This is from the Picayune Strand Forest outside of Naples in 2023. We actually have a whole line of them. I have multiple. There's another really good one.
Nice.
And we actually captured what I believe is a panther kitten as well. Kind of see the pad there. So these were found in the trackway with the large ones. We thought at first
Yeah, I've
maybe it
seen
was a
some big prints.
bobcat, but we believe it was a kitten and not a
Yeah.
bobcat because they walked parallel, and that was really cool. And I actually had a guy I went to high school with. He's like a teacher at a school, and he messaged me after I posted I had like half a dozen of these tracks, and he said, "I'm teaching like an animal class at this school I'm at. Would you be willing to send one of these in so I could show it in my like tracking class when we're talking about wildlife?" And that was really cool. I got to send him one of the tracks, and he was like, I get to show the kids this and teach them about nature. And that was really, really cool for me. Again, kind of going with like the inspiring kids. And yeah, I submitted those tracks to the Florida Panther tracker on the Florida Wildlife Commission, and they have it up on their website. So really they're amazing animals, mountain lions. Just, I'd like to see one from a safe distance and not in a close encounter.
Yeah, I mean, in the state of Florida, we have approximately a little over 200 of them, and they're
Right.
rarely seen. I mean, rarely seen. And the research area that I go to, they have been seen in there. I've seen the
Right.
photos. I've seen the trail cams. They pass through there, and that's my goal. Is one day I want to, because in my mind, if I can get that rare animal on film, I can get a Bigfoot. That's just my motivation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's cool. I know when I was there, they talked about because the population had gotten so low, they actually took some West Texas mountain lions and brought them in to like bolster the genetic pool of that particular group of panthers. I've been lucky again on 2 occasions to find tracks. The first time was we were doing it Beyond the Trail in the Big Cypress National Preserve. It was in that area, and these tracks were found the following year, which were again the Picayune Strand Forest, which is just outside of Naples. So that whole area pretty much is like seems to be a lot of panthers, and there's a lot of skunk ape sightings actually in those areas too. That's the reason why we primarily were there, and the panther thing was kind of on the side, which was really neat.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, I've
that's
found
neat.
some signs. I found some prints, and I think it's about 2 years ago. I filmed not the full carcass, but parts of a dead animal in the tree. So that tells me it was probably a Florida panther, taking up there to eat and stuff like that. And I found bones fresh, like there's still meat on them, and always look straight up in case it was eating up there and it dropped it. You know what I mean? So I'll look up in the trees to make sure there's not one checking me out.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Again, man, I appreciate you, dude. I'm thankful for this opportunity. I'm thankful that you agreed to come on the show. Big fan, like I said, and everybody out there, please check out everything that we've posted and help Alex. And I look for all the things that you do in the future. I really do, Alex.
I really appreciate that. Again, thank you for having me on. I just enjoy having these conversations with folks that are as passionate about the subject as yourself, and others. So, thanks for letting me on and kind of sharing some of my stories.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you. I'm going to drop you backstage, and I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and I'll talk to you in just a moment. Thanks, guys. Awesome show. Alex is fantastic. Just a great all-around guy, and you could tell that in his videos. I knew when I reached out to him, I already had it in my mind that this is just a really great guy, and it was a great show. I appreciate everybody being here. Some great questions in the chat room. Couldn't get to them all because, like you guys, I want to watch the show too. I like listening to Alex and talking and stuff. So, um, but fantastic. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Like I said, temperatures are getting better, so we're gonna all of us that live in Florida, like Frank there and stuff like that. Frank, call me tomorrow. I put it in the chat room. Call me tomorrow. Thanks, Lori. It was good seeing you. I hope you come back and watch more shows. God bless each and every one of you guys. I want all of you guys to live happy lives, get out in the woods, and enjoy yourselves. And I will talk to you soon.